Good morning. All right, so our story for today is from the Thursday part in your journal. And a lot of things actually happened on this Thursday, but we're just going to focus on Jesus' betrayal, when Jesus was betrayed and he was arrested. So before all that, how the Thursday actually started, Jesus had a Passover meal with his disciples. And at the end of the meal, after the meal was over, as the meal was ending, Judas left. Remember we talked about yesterday how that Judas was going to think of a time and an opportunity that he could get Jesus arrested because they promised him money, 30 pieces of silver for Jesus. So as the meal was ending that Jesus was having with his disciples, Judas left. When the meal was over, Jesus gathered the rest of the disciples who were still there with him, 11 of them, and he left. And they went to the Garden of Gethsemane. So they went to a garden by Jerusalem. As after supper, it was starting to get dark already. Lord Jesus took all his disciples with him. At the beginning of the garden, he left the disciples sitting there. He says, "You stay here." But he took 3 disciples with him. Can you guess which 3 disciples went a little bit further with the Lord Jesus? Peter, James, and John. The 3 who he also took with him when he went to several other places. So he took Peter, James, and John with him, and he said, "All right, I want you to sit here, and I want you to watch with me." Jesus went just a little bit further, and then what Jesus did is he started to pray. The Lord Jesus knew what was going to happen. He knew he had to suffer. He knew he had to die. He knew it was going to be very painful. He knew it was going to be very terrible what was going to happen. But the Lord Jesus also knew that it had to happen. But his sorrow, his heart was so heavy and so sorrowful that he prayed to his Father in heaven. He said, "Father, let this cup pass from me. Lord, can this suffering just leave me, that I don't have to suffer? But not as I will, but as thou wilt." He says, "Lord, I know it has to happen." So then he came back to his disciples, Peter, James, and John, the ones who he left just a little bit away. And he noticed they were sleeping. What did Jesus say? He said, "What? Could you not have watched with me for 1 hour?" So the disciples, they try their very best to stay awake. Jesus says, "I'm going to go and pray a little more." So those disciples are trying their very best to stay awake. And Jesus goes and prays again. He says the same words. He says, "Father, let this cup pass from me. Not as I will, but as thou wilt." He comes back again to those 3 disciples. And they are sleeping. They just couldn't stay awake. And then Lord Jesus, he went back again and he prayed one more time. The same thing he prayed again. And this time when he came back, he said to those disciples, those 3, he says, "You can sleep now. Now it's time for me to be arrested and to be betrayed. The person who's going to betray me is coming. Stand up. Come with me. The person who's betraying me is right here." And as they look up, sure enough, here comes Judas, with him a whole army of soldiers. And all those soldiers, they're carrying swords, they're carrying staves as they approach Jesus. Now Judas, when he left the meal and he went to the high priests, the ones who promised him money if he could get them Jesus, he said, "It's dark. And you probably won't recognize Jesus, but I know Jesus. I've been with him for 3 years. I know which one of all this whole group, I know which one Jesus is. So the person who I kiss when I greet him, that is Jesus. That is the person you have to arrest." So sure enough, the soldiers there, they're waiting for the sign, right? The sign from Judas. Judas walks up to Lord Jesus. He greets him. He says, "Hail, Master." And he kisses the Lord Jesus. That was the sign. The Lord Jesus looks at Judas. He doesn't get angry. You know what he says to Judas? He says, "Friend, what are you doing here?" And then the soldiers, they all come to Jesus. They grab him and they want to arrest him. Now all the other disciples are watching this happen. They're starting to get a little bit scared. But Peter, he thinks to himself, "I'm going to defend my master. I'm going to defend Jesus." Peter takes his sword and he swings it around as he tries to protect Jesus. As he is swinging his sword around, he cuts off the ear of the servant of the high priest. This person's name was Malchus. He cut off his ear. Jesus looked at Peter and he says, Peter, don't you realize that if I really wanted to be protected, I could have prayed to my Father in heaven and he would have sent armies of angels to protect me. I don't need to be protected right now. I can't be protected because I promised that I needed to suffer and die for the sins of all my children, right? So then what the Lord Jesus does is he takes that ear from Malchus and he heals his ear so that his ear is back on his head. His ear does not look like it was cut off anymore. So then what does Jesus do? He goes with the soldiers who arrested him and he walks with them. Now what happens to these disciples? They all forsook Jesus and fled. They got scared and they fled. They ran away. They didn't dare to stay with Jesus anymore. So that's where we're going to end for Thursday. So that happened on Thursday night in the Garden of Gethsemane. So in your journals, in your books, you can write about Jesus' arrest and when Jesus was betrayed. And remember to write like you're telling it, like a disciple saw it, right? So on Thursday, you are going to write about the arrest and betrayal of Lord Jesus. Pick an event from it that one of those disciples would have seen. Now remember that Peter, James, and John were the only ones who saw Jesus praying. The other disciples were waiting further back. But all of the disciples did see Judas coming. All of the disciples did see Jesus arrested. Right? And they all saw Peter trying to protect Jesus. And they also all saw Jesus being led away with the army. They took him. Jesus didn't fight them, right? He just went with them. And all those disciples, they ran away because they were afraid. Some of them are going to come back again. And we're going to hear about that another time. So continue doing your good work. I'm seeing neat writing. And I am seeing good detailed pictures. Awesome work, you guys. And I'm seeing some of you are coloring as well, which is also very nice. So keep up your good work. This is your last Bible project for the year. Make it a good one. And then I hope to see you again tomorrow. All right. See you.